Hi there. So, I recently posted several videos detailing allegations of serious police misconduct and potential corruption regarding an organized sexual exploitation and teen sex trafficking network in the 22nd district of Vienna, Austria. In these videos, I also highlight the multiple failing systems and safeguarding infrastructure where cumulatively negligence, insufficient training, lack of convergence, intra-organizational communication, and/or intentional malpractice is resulting in emotionally and psychologically vulnerable schoolgirls being susceptible to sexual exploitation on a late-stage grooming curvature trajectory, where transactionalization and adultification is priming these girls for exploitability, including child sex trafficking and prostitution. If you wish to further understand how a grooming pipeline is currently active and functional in the 22nd district of Vienna, then please refer to my other recent videos where I outline the operational aspects of the organized exploitation, networking infrastructure, micro to macro level detailing of mechanisms and drivers, and how this exact model is actually already recognized, understood, and not uncommon across Europe. However, in this video today, I'm going to be explaining the many failings of the educational system, in particular, the local high school adjacent to the centralized hub of the systemic sexual exploitation, incidentally, a local bar, and how the school's poor vigilance, training, observation, and safeguarding coordination is essentially rendering the school as a feeder of exploitable young females to the grooming network. Okay, so the school is a secondary school, it is a high school. It is located in Rennbahnweg, in the 22nd district of Vienna. The bar, which is the centralized hub of the grooming pipeline, is in close proximity of this high school. Young females with minor status, schoolgirls, children, access this bar as early as age 14, 15. They travel directly from school to the bar. So between 3 to 4 p.m. after school finishes, these schoolgirls often frequent the bar, which is probably a 10-minute walk. Now, how many girls are involved that can be traced directly back to this school? Well, we have student E, we have student N, who are essentially permanent fixtures at this bar. We also have student V, student L, D, and so on. I personally know of probably half a dozen that I can directly place both at the high school and entrenched within this grooming adjacent environment, this organized sexual exploitation with clear structure. So this is multiple females all from the same school. The school is essentially a feeder for this grooming network. And you might be thinking, well, the school is not culpable. They're not, accountable for where these girls are going once they exit the school gates. But the first thing that you need to understand is that while these students are enrolled at that school and under the age of 18, it is their legal obligation to ensure the safety of these students, not just when they're at school, but when they leave those school gates. So socially, domestically, they have a duty of care to know what is happening to their students outside, beyond the school gates. And if you're thinking, well, there is absolutely no way that they could ever have known, well, I'm going to make examples of student E and student N in particular, because these are the two students of which I have the largest data sets for that are accessible. Now, these two students have been in their system for 7 years. They've been under the duty of care of the school for 7 years, under the observation of the school for 7 years, sat in their classrooms for 7 years. These two students are highly enmeshed. They form an enmeshed dyad. Now, enmeshment is basically where you cannot function without the other person. Emotionally, you cannot survive without the other person. You need that person's regulation. They regulate you. Co-regulation, codependency. Now, throughout the entirety of their 7 years within this high school, because of this enmeshment, both students have been socially isolated to one another, with student N essentially having the social monopoly over student E. Social monopolization. Student E finds it difficult to make friends with her female peers outside of the enmeshed dyad, with student N essentially leveraging, instrumentalizing, and coercing so that any potential connections that student E makes with female peers remain peripheral and unintegrated into the dyad. So basically, teachers are trained observers. They would recognize this straight away. For 7 years, under their duty of care, in their classrooms every day, they would definitely notice, the two females who are only ever sat together, they're only ever seen socializing with each other at lunch, in the schoolyard. Teachers are trained to look for interpersonal dynamics amongst the students. Now let's risk stack and assess student E. Student E's risk profile here. So Sexually abused, age 10. Now, this childhood sexual trauma has never been addressed. She has never been referred to counseling, clinical intervention, iatrogenic risk mitigation, nothing. This student has been alcohol dependent since as early as age 14, 15, using alcohol both as a social lubricant and as an emotional depressant. Age 15, this student is claiming suicide ideation, they're claiming depression. Their domestic living is split between two residences, her mother's apartment and her grandmother's apartment. Split residence is extremely unstable for a teenage female. And in this dynamic, essentially we can see that the young female seeks sanctuary, safety and stability at her grandmother's. Because at her mother's apartment, which is the address given to the school as her place of permanent residence, her brother domestically abuses her. Her brother has thrown glass at her that has cut open her feet. Her brother is a student also enrolled at the very same high school, which actually provides them with an even larger vector for them to map their observations on, because it's not just one highly dysregulated female whose fluctuating affect baselines should be presenting the school, the trained observers, with many observationals that can be mapped onto a vector in order to distinguish recognized patterns. They also have a sibling, 2 years their junior, who has anger issues. Now, domestic abuse is occurring at home, but this person has anger issues, and they're going through a developmental phase where such issues would not be contained. It would bleed over. There would almost certainly be incidents at school, a disciplinary record, or signs of their aggressive disposition. So you have two students with issues that almost certainly should be being observed, and a common denominator. They're both from the same household. Now, teachers, safeguarding officers, pastoral officers are trained to observe and coordinate and look for these exact interpersonal dynamics and patterns. The student claims that she cannot talk to her mother about her emotions because her mother is emotionally vacant. She has checked out. But what her mother does is she overcompensates for the fact that she is emotionally unavailable by leaving large sums of money around the house. 100 euros here, 100 euros there, 50 euros on the table, 200 euros on the kitchen worktop, with no oversight. So this money is basically used to go drinking at bars or purchase alcohol that she will consume at home in her bedroom. Now, two things are happening simultaneously here. This girl is not understanding the value of money, where money comes from. The second thing is that she's not understanding the value of emotional care. So she's learning that money is care, and she does not understand emotional care. This leaves her exceptionally vulnerable and susceptible to transactionalization, which is exactly what is occurring now that she is on the late stage grooming curvature trajectory, entrenched within this network of grooming and organized sexual exploitation. So aside from claiming suicide ideation, depression, this student claims they are isolated, they are alone, that all the other students dislike her, they spit on her. So isolation, depression, suicide ideation, alcoholism, unresolved childhood sexual trauma, split residence, domestic abuse, and also no paternal figure, no father, absent since early formative development. This is called risk stacking. Cumulatively, this young female who is enrolled at this school is exceptionally vulnerable. Now, what's very interesting is that risk stacking is utilized by the predators themselves during the initial preliminary stages of integration into the network of sexual exploitation. This is why ages 14 to 15, the girls frequent the bar. They are offered free alcohol by the bartenders. The alcohol is gratis, and this is serving multiple purposes. A, the young females acclimate to the adult social space, this adult environment. B, exposure to adult men is normalized. The presence of adult men around these 15-year-old females no longer becomes abnormal. It is normalized incrementally. It erodes the young females' perceptions of danger, their boundaries. Adult men approaching them thereafter no longer becomes a threat to these girls. And then slowly, incrementally, the sexual elements are introduced. By ages 16, the alcoholic beverages are no longer provided for free. They are provided with the expectation that sexual services will be leveraged to repay the bartenders for providing them with these strong alcoholic beverages. And the sex occurs in the customer toilets, private spaces on the premises of the local bar. And this is the start of the escalation before cocaine is introduced, before things move away from the bar to private apartments, to hotel rooms, etc. But ultimately, during this period between 15 and 16 where there is no sexual activity, it's just alcohol is being provided for free, they're acclimating to this adult social space. The young females are being enticed by access to adult privilege and adult status, which is of course very enticing to young females who are on the cusp of adulthood. They're not adults, legally, emotionally, but they want to feel as though they are adults. This is very enticing for young females, and especially young females who are isolated from their peers at school. They have no social life amongst their actual age mates. This therefore becomes their social life, drinking in this bar, surrounded by adult men. No female presence, no female oversight. All the bar staff male, all the patrons male. It's a closed loop system. It is controlled, it is contained. These girls are isolated, they just don't realize it. But ultimately, during this phase where the sexual activity is still dormant, they're assessing, they are risk stacking, they are getting to know the girls, they're assessing for exploitability. So everything that I've just mentioned, domestic abuse, unresolved childhood sexual trauma, alcohol dependence, absent father, social isolation, depression, suicide ideation, these are all things that they are looking for when assessing the viability of exploiting particular females. In this case, student E is an exceptional candidate for exploitation and grooming. Now let's turn our focus back onto the school and why they're culpable. Now, as you can see, there's already so many red flags that they have missed, or perhaps they have observed, notes have been made, but for some reason, whether it be poor training, poor coordination, negligence, communication, the wider patterns have not been connected. So let's talk about more specific incidents that have happened whilst under school supervision, school's duty of care. So apparently, there are rumors circulating amongst the students regarding student E, that student E sleeps with male teachers at this school. But what's very interesting is that student E herself confessed to having sexual designs on 2 of her male teachers, and that she wanted to have sexual relations with them, and even had photographs of them on her phone, which makes the rumors circulating amongst the students corroborable. This has originated from somewhere. The proverbial smoke must come from fire. So the students have observed something. Now, if the students have observed something, the teachers are going to observe something, even if they had not. Teachers hear rumors that circulate amongst students. They hear everything. Let's see, other incidents that we have. School prom, a very Americanized, lavish school prom. Security guard at the prom, late 50s, possibly 60 years of age, fraternizing sexually with student E. Now, is the security guard employed by the school or an agency? How vetted and regulated is his appointment in this role at the school? Other incidents that have occurred. International school trip to Malta, 2024. 2 students, again, student E and student N. These students who have formed a highly enmeshed dyad throughout 7 years within this school's system. Again, the 2 girls who are only ever seen together. No other girls interact with them. That's unusual. We need to observe this. And yes, safeguarding officers are trained to be very concerned about this. It's one thing to be socially isolated just to yourself. It's actually more dangerous to be socially isolated between 2 people. Dyadic isolation. Because this is how extreme enmeshment is formed. I mean, if we look back in history, Columbine, that's an enmeshed dyad between 2 students who were socially isolated. And the 2 students became responsible for each other's reality testing. They basically amplified each other's issues, confirmed each other's realities, and it resulted in a massacre. This is why these kind of enmeshed dyads within school systems are extremely dangerous, and we are trained to observe and recognize them. But I digress. On this international school trip to Malta, under school supervision, students E and N were somehow allowed to access an adult social environment, a bar, at night, where they accessed alcohol illegally, fraternized and engaged sexually with adult males at this bar. And there is photographic evidence of this incident. Now, this is international. This is in another country. The school has a serious duty of care. Now, I believe age of consent in Malta is 16, is it not? So engaging sexually with these men whilst age 15, that's serious. Alcohol, again, illegal. The provision of alcohol to these minors, very illegal. All under school supervision whilst they're out of the country. If that isn't bad enough, it occurred again. On an international school trip to Italy in 2025. It occurred again. On an international school trip to Bratislava, Slovakia in 2025. There is a lot of high-risk sexual activity occurring whilst directly under the school supervision, not just outside of school, outside of the school gates, at the school or on international trips under the school's supervision and duty of care. This is extremely serious. Furthermore, these two students are actually engaged in cyber surveillance. Student N is cyber surveilling student E, monitoring her social interactions over social media, trying to prevent student E from social networking, forming new connections with other peers, other people. But then the two students begin to lie about their ages, deceive adult men from remote locations, trying to get them to wire money that can be used to pay for their alcoholic beverages, or just, if they go to McDonald's. And I actually have some very disturbing quotes from student E in front of me. So student E is quoted as saying, "I had to have sex with the bartender in the toilets because you would not send me money to pay for my drinks." And so we have a student from this local high school in the 22nd district of Vienna. She's in this bar in close proximity to the high school, which is functioning as a grooming pipeline. She's in this bar an hour after school, having sex with a bartender in the customer toilet, and then claiming she had to do it in order to pay for her alcoholic beverages. You have to remember that since ages 14, 15, these girls have been entrenched within adult social environments, exposed to men. They've had their boundaries essentially blurred. Their own age perception is distorted. They now firmly believe that they are adults. So when they lie about their ages and their status, they don't feel as though they're lying. They feel as though they're just instrumentalizing age status, minor status versus majority status. They feel they're adults. We are adults, but technically we're still minors. Let's just lie about our ages. But then there's a high degree of consciousness here, because when these two female minors, schoolgirls, are eventually held to account by adult standards, adult consequences, this is when the females begin to instrumentalize their minor statuses and say, "We are children. You are a predator. We are children," even though they're the ones actively lying and deceiving adult men about their ages. But this is inherited. This is learned behavior. They have learnt that lying, deceiving, grants them access to adult status and therefore adult privilege. Now, student E is on late-stage grooming curvature trajectory, and this escalates around a female's 16th, 17th birthdays. So on the eve of her 17th birthday, it does indeed escalate. Student E is introduced to cocaine by bartenders, male patrons of the bar. Now, cocaine serves to emotionally blunt victims, but also increase their impulsiveness and risk-taking in environments where high-risk sexual activity and sexual exploitation is occurring. Sexual activity moves away from the bar to the private apartments of elder men, associates of the bar, who are introduced to these young females through the bar at the bar. At these private apartments, the females are offered cocaine, champagne, and international flights. Now, this is where the sex trafficking is introduced. Multiple men, upon meeting these girls for the very first time, taking them back to their apartments, all insist on flying them out of the country, always to the same specific destination, Serbia. Multiple men, all with exactly the same modus operandi. On one occasion, flights were booked. Another elder male associated with the bar, upon taking student E back to his private apartment, expressed his desire for her to be his girlfriend, but to still have sex with other men. That he would like to fly her to Serbia, again, Serbia, to have sex with his entire village and his own father. At this point, it's basically an open admission of what he is, a pimp, and his intentions for her, sex trafficking for the purpose of sexual exploitation and prostitution. And this is because they're so confident by this point that it has been normalized. It is so normalized we can just say it out loud, and the girls are completely unresponsive. They do not perceive any danger. It's been so normalized. Anyway, the girls are offered breast implants, cosmetic surgeries, fillers, Botox. Remember, they're 16, highly illegal. If you try to report and expose grooming to the Austrian authorities, the police will dismiss you through minimization. They will compress by referring to the age of consent being 14, overlooking the fact that under Austrian and EU law, transactional sex under the age of 18 constitutes prostitution because they have minor status, child prostitution. It is highly illegal, regardless of age of consent. Now, around the time of their 17th birthdays, the girls are taken to hotel rooms with multiple men per session. Group sex, where payment is exchanged for these sexual services. Direct payments, the transference of currency. This is prostitution, and because these girls hold minor status, it is child prostitution. Now, the girls are actually quoted as saying that this is their kink. "This is just my kink." So having sex with multiple men in hotel rooms for money is their kink. However, in trauma-informed psychology, this is one of the most common claims verbatim stated by young female victims entrenched in sexually exploitative networks. It is a psychological survival mechanism to reframe exploitation as choice, empowerment, and agency. It is the psyche's survival mechanism for convincing these girls that they are in control of the situation. Because multiple men are attempting to fly these schoolgirls between Austria and Serbia, this is sex trafficking. They do not have parents' consent for any of this. These are children. And the perpetrators have confessed to their intentions as to why they want to fly these girls to Serbia. It is for the purpose of sexual exploitation and prostitution. They have confessed to this. Now, Serbia is one of the most unregulated countries in Europe. Once these girls go there, they're gone. Now, what's very scary about late-stage grooming curvature escalation is the fact that everything is priming these girls for sexual exploitation and prostitution by age 18. When the legal threshold is crossed, they hold majority status, and therefore everything can be reframed as relational, and there is no legal mandated safeguarding to protect these girls. Multiple men offering rings to these girls, expressing their intentions to marry them on their 18th birthdays, not 2 days after, not 2 months after, on the day. This is anticipatory threshold grooming. And it's nothing more than symbolic. It is to keep the girls emotionally invested and in orbit of the predators and the system long enough for the legal threshold to be crossed. It is that simple. Now, the girls are 17. They're in their final year at this high school in Nuremberg, in the 22nd district of Vienna. If we're to make an example of student E, and we're just assuming that somehow the school has missed everything over the past 7 years, they just failed completely. This is the moment where there becomes absolutely no excuses for the fact that they failed to intervene. Why? Well, September is marked by absenteeism. Student E is visibly very dysregulated emotionally. Her affect is flattened. Her ability to articulate her emotional states, gone. Identity suppression, erosion. We have extreme fatigue. A student in class hungover from alcoholic intoxication the previous night. Use of cocaine. Suddenly the student's affect becomes manic, unpredictable, irritable. Her clothing becomes adultified, sexualized. But here is the biggest clue. Her face. Now, teachers are trained to observe changes in students' appearances, weight gain, malnutrition, things like that. Signs of abuse, signs of stress, particularly during final year of school when there is matura, final exams and graduation. These students are under a lot of stress, so the teachers at this point are trained to be exceptionally vigilant, to check in on students, ask them how they're coping. What are you doing in your spare time to cope with all the stress of exams? Where do you go? Where do you socialize? You okay? How's everything at home? You're looking tired, I've noticed. Is everything okay? But by this point, student E's face, it's not natural fluctuation in weight. It is dramatic facial alteration, fillers. And this is a child. Now, this is the most visible sign of adultification. Her attire and the fact that her face has clearly been altered by cosmetic procedure. And this girl is sat in your class every single day. You now have clear, visible signs. You have eyes. You can see her face. You can see the rapid decline of this student, both physically and psychologically, within a very short period of time. And yet the months roll on. Hotel, child prostitution in December, January, February of 2026. Socializing in adult social spaces, posting photographs on social media, sat with wine glasses in adult environments, looking disheveled, makeup very poorly applied, pose extremely objectified, wired but vacant eyes, fatigued, highly sexualized, adultified, inappropriate clothing, transactionalized, objectified, adultified, and still the school has done nothing. The school is eventually made aware of the situation, but there is no liaising with the KJH, which is basically Child and Youth Welfare, Child Protective Services, the police have dismissed everything through minimization. And so essentially you have a student who's been in your class for 7 years, highly emotionally dysregulated, fragmented, unresolved childhood sexual trauma, being domestically abused at home, absent, late, hungover, socially isolated, clothing becomes age inappropriate, they become adultified. All of her agency is outsourced either to student N or the environment that's stabilizing her. the environment that she's outsourcing her identity to. All reality testing is outsourced. Vulnerable to sexual exploitation through trauma reenactment, susceptible to transactionalization, cognitive dissonance, cognitive distortion, a mother who does not possess the psychological literacy to correctly identify her daughter's issues, and so simply stigmatizes them by calling her schizophrenic or crazy, clearly aware that there is something fundamentally wrong with her daughter emotionally and psychologically, yet never seeking clinical care, counseling, psychotherapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, nothing. This girl is in no position to say that any of what she's doing is her choice. This female is severely psychologically unwell. And even if she wasn't, and this was her choice, there's still so much criminality happening here. And so please remember that this school is throwing lavish Americanized proms. They're taking their students on multiple international trips per year, and yet they're failing at the most basic levels of safeguarding. And their entire safeguarding infrastructure and the ability to converge with the KJH, the ability for the KJH to converge with the police, for all of these systems to be able to triangulate, all of them are failing. Multiple young female students of this same high school are entrenched within an environment of systemic grooming and exploitation and attempted sex trafficking. And so many opportunities for the school to recognize serious issues and take preventative action, yet failed at every level and every opportunity. Sexually abused as she enrolled at this school 7 years ago. Alcohol dependent by age 14-15. Depressed, suicidal, socially isolated, domestically abused, living between two addresses, socializing exclusively with adult men by age 15, drinking after school virtually every other day, rumors circulating about this student sleeping with teachers, students spitting on student E, highly fragmented, emotionally dysregulated, enmeshed, complete loss of agency to student N, who claims parental authority over student E despite being peers. Exactly the same age, but student N claims, I'm like her mother. She is incapable without me. Student E, you need me. And in return, student E saying, is student N a good person? Is she a good friend? Is she even a good person? No, I know that, you know that, but I need her, because without her, I'll have nothing. I have nothing without her. She is not a good person, but without her, I will have nothing. I need her. Completely dependent on a female she does not even like for emotional survival in a school environment. Entrapped, enmeshed, with student N actually leveraging student E's body within the grooming adjacent environment. Student N uses student E's attractiveness to access that bar. Men pay for student E's drinks because she's the more conventionally attractive. They want her. And so student N is leveraging student E, comes up behind student E when she is intoxicated at the bar around 40, 50, 60-year-old adult males, and grabs student E's breasts without permission, jiggles them in order to arouse those men so that they buy student E alcoholic beverages that student N then benefits from indirectly. Student N is not having sex in the customer toilets with these men, with the bartenders, with any male patron associated with the bartenders within this closed-loop system. Student N displaces all sexual risk onto student E, who is the one who has to sleep with the bartenders and the men. So student E, abused at home by her brother, sexually abused, alcohol dependent, at school bullied, spat on, socially isolated. At the bar, she's being coerced and leveraged by her supposed friend. So her friend's exploiting her sexuality, the adult men are exploiting her sexuality. This is all extremely serious. This school is failing at every possible level. And there needs to be serious investigations, internal reviews, reforms, because if it's not this girl, if it's not any of the other girls who are currently involved, you enroll your daughter at this school, it could happen to her. It could happen to your friend's daughter. Your daughters are being failed, and they're being groomed and primed. They're transactionalized, adultified, and primed for sexual exploitation and prostitution by the age of 18. At the moment they turn 18. Thank you for listening.